It's been a volatile stretch for soybean oil, and it's not just about energy spillover. From EPA exemptions to crop conditions and China trade rumors, there's a lot to unpack. So, where does that leave soy, corn, and wheat heading into the fall? I'm Johanna Bota, and joining us today is Bertrand Oesterle, StoneX's VP of Clearing and Execution Sales. Welcome, Bertrand. Nice to have you. So, let's talk about the recent volatility in soybean oil. How do you explain that?
So first of all, we had last Friday an EPA decision in the US, and that EPA decision was on the SRE, so the small refinery exemptions, and some 63 out of 77 exemptions were reviewed. And without going into all the details, because there's been quite a lot of information about it, the bottom line is that the market looked at it as bullish soybean oil because it means that there would be more soybean oil in the US going into the biofuel. So on the back of it, soybean oil rallied quite significantly last Friday. If we look at September, the range was huge. It was 51.41 to some 55.60. And since then, it's been volatile because the market has been adjusting to the news, but also to the fact that the energy markets have been putting some pressure back into soybean oil. So yesterday we settled around the 52.70 mark, and as we walked in the room, we were around the 52.90. So we're more or less in the middle of that very huge range we had last Friday. Overall, the soybean oil gains did spill over into soybean and corn for a little while, and for soybean in general, the specs have covered some of their shorts and they remain a tiny bit short.
Okay, and let's talk about U.S. crop conditions. They're looking good right now, right? So what did we learn from the latest crop tour for soybeans?
So in soybean, the crop tour came in at 53 bushel per acre, so that's the Pro Farmer crop tour. It's slightly below the 53.6 we had seen from the USDA or from our own StoneX crop survey, but it is very much in line with what we had heard about. In terms of the crop conditions in the US have actually re-improved by 1% compared to the previous week. Some 69% of the US crop in soybean is good to excellent rated, and that's still above the 5-year average of 61%.
Okay, so good news then. So on the one hand, we have good U.S. soybean crops with good conditions, and on the other hand, we have high demand for biofuel from the biofuel sector. So how does that affect the U.S. soybean export market?
The exports are an interesting bit at present because they cause some concern. When we look at the current pace of exports from the US in soybean, it's currently 1% below or behind the pace that we need to get to achieve the USDA annual figure. Okay. But the real query is about what's going on with China. And that's the elephant missing in the room, if I may put it that way. Yeah. So US exporters have been telling us that recently they've been catching up on US exports of soybean, but there's still no export to China. There's been some rumor of a merchant, without mentioning its name, from China looking at US prices and presumably having potentially bought some US soybean. There's been nothing confirmed by the USDA as such, so therefore it seems like it's more in talks than info. And for the moment, it seems that US exporters are pretty worried about the fact that at present, they're not doing any business with China. We still have no US-China trade deal. The exemption for the tariffs, everything is posted to mid-November, so there's still some time for negotiation, but there's no deal. Despite the fact that Trump 2 weeks ago said that he thought that China would come in to buy 4 times as much US soybean than previously, there's no evidence. So it is the big worry, and it is a worry at a time when especially and specifically the Brazilians are ahead in their pace of exports to China.
Okay, so just rumors for now. Now, before moving on from oil seeds, anything new happening with rapeseed?
So rapeseed and canola have reacted naturally to the EPA decision in soybean oil. What has been interesting is that previously, or prior to the EPA decision, the canola market was suffering from that decision from China to put 75.8% of duty on Canadian canola because of dumping allegations.
Yep.
And at the same time, the Canadians have started to harvest their canola. It started some 2-3 weeks ago. It will go in full swing in September. So we had a market that was heavier on the sell side. And last Friday, when the EPA came up, the market in soybean oil went up, pushed soybean up, pushed canola up, pushed also rapeseed up, and that caused some pain for those canola recent sellers. In terms of the impact it had on rapeseed, we were around the 470 mark basis north. We rallied to 475, so there was some spillover support. However, that spillover support has been mitigated over the past week or so by the fact that the euro has moved a lot. So we've been back down to 470 this morning. The euro is lower. We're back up to around 474. So we really have a range of 470-75 that people have been trading in and out of. And the Mars body of the European Union has upped its estimate on the rapeseed yields in Europe from 3.2 to 3.24. That's ton per hectare. And in terms of other rapeseed news, we can look at Ukraine as well. So Ukraine has finished its harvest, and the agricultural ministry is stating that the harvest is yielding some 3.16 million tons of production. So in a sense, it's better than what it was feared at one point, where people thought it would be below 3 million tons. It's actually a touch above.
Okay, let's talk about corn now. What happened, or how did the crop tour and the EPA affect the prices?
So corn is very much linked to soybean in terms of biofuels in general. So when the EPA decision came in, soybean oil rallied soybean, soybean rallied corn in terms of spillover support. But that spillover support was short-lived because the US crop conditions in corn are still pretty high. They're 71% good to excellent, and that's still beyond the 5-year average of 59%. And in terms of crop tour, ProFarmer came lower than the USDA or our own estimate. So they came in at 182.7 bushel per acre for the US crop. It's still a record yield, but it's way lower than the 188.8 from the USDA or the 188.1 we had from our own crop survey. So it is a lower figure, but generally speaking, people know that ProFarmer has a tendency to estimate below the USDA over the past X amount of years. So it was not that out of the ordinary to see a lower figure. And overall, the market is still looking at the fact that it's still a record yield, and the specs are still remaining pretty short in Chicago corn with some 253,000 lot shorts.
Okay, what about corn outside of the US, more specifically South America and the EU?
So in South America, the safrinha crop, so the second corn crop in Brazil, is now completely harvested. We're now turning our attention to the new crop, first corn crop in Brazil, and that's starting to be planted. AgriRoll was mentioning that it's 3.5% planted. Next door to Argentina, we had the Buenos Aires Grain Exchange mentioning the new corn crop for Argentina. It's going to be on a 7.8 million hectare area, according to Baggy, and that would be a second largest area on record. And that planting is starting next month in September.
Okay.
And for Europe, Europe has been a continuation of the catastrophe scenario. Basically, we've had clients in Italy, Austria, Hungary, Romania, Bulgaria telling us that it is not looking good. We've had a lot of pictures, for example, on LinkedIn showing some corn cobs which are half the size that you would expect, very badly grown, and it is still a concern in terms of the entire European crop. The heat that we had at one point in the summer has had a negative impact.
Okay.
Now, initially the estimates of productions were around 58 to 62 million tons. Nowadays, we're more talking 55 to 58 million tons. We had an update from Mars as well, so the European Commission body, and they've reduced their estimate of European yields from 7.18 to 693 ton per hectare. So we see that that damage is being taken into account. And when we look at the Agrimet crop conditions in France, they've continued to fall as well. They're 62% good to excellent, so we've lost another 3% compared to the previous week. And when we put this in perspective, it's 62% compared to 85% when we started in June. So overall, It's not a good production year for Europe. But when we speak to consumers, consumers are not alarmed, and I need to explain why.
Yeah.
So first of all, in soybean meal, feed compounders have been able to benefit from the fall in soybean meal, so they've focused a lot on the protein from soybean meal rather than maize or feed wheat, for example. So the fact that there is less maize is less of a worry because there are alternatives, and on top of it, consumers are saying that they can also look at potential feed wheat from Germany or Poland, because we know that, for example, 30% of the German wheat crop is likely to meet just feed quality.
Yeah. What about wheat?
So wheat's been interesting, especially Paris wheat. So over the past week or so, we've had people coming in saying that they are starting to feel bullish about Paris wheat. So December Paris wheat made a low of 193.25. This week we touched 193.5 again, but we've been trying to go back up on December Paris wheat around the 196.25 mark. And that little support is, according to the bull, because of two elements. First of all, they look at farmer selling retention throughout Europe, especially out of Bulgaria and Romania still. And at the same time, they see that some merchants have booked some export contracts out of France for barley to China recently, or for wheat to Egypt. So Egypt bought 63,000 tons of Paris wheat, of French wheat, I should say. And also there was a second deal that is estimated in a wide range of 200 to 420,000 tons. And what the physical market is telling us is that the premiums are going up because those merchants need to entice those farmers to sell in order to fulfill those short-term export deals.
Yeah.
So that has been the interesting bit, because there's a feel from some that we may consolidate here and we may go up a touch. However, the specs are remaining very short still. So in Paris wheat, we still have some 250,000 lots short from specs. And in Chicago wheat, we still have about 107,000 lots short. And the focus is now out of September, because the open interest is winding down. The SEPDEC roll has taken place, but the December open interest has absolutely ballooned, and it's a huge 387,000 lots of open interest. So it shows that the specs are very short still in December. That's going to counter that bullish element I've just mentioned. And also it's going to continue to put the DEC March in focus as a spread. That DEC March is going to be very much under the magnifying glass when we get close to the December option expiry on the 17th of November. And so from the 1st to the 20th of November, the fund roll is going to be putting that DEC March into focus. So DEC March is currently around the -6 mark, and some people have refrained from selling it because of that very huge open interest and that potential next roll.
I see. And are there any updates from Russia and Ukraine?
So for Russia, we still continue to hear of larger crop estimates. So we've had Sovecon increasing their estimates from 85.2 to 85.4 million tons. At the same time, ICAR put 85.5 up to 86. So that crop is getting slightly bigger. And we've had some information from Sovecon about the farmer retention in Russia, which would be abating. So basically, Sovecon is stating that the August export would be around 4 million tons. So that's twice as much than in July. But it's still about 30% less than the previous year, when we had 5.7 million tons in August. And in terms of Ukraine, Ukraine has completed its harvest. It's around the 21 million ton mark. And the interesting bit about that figure is that about just under half of it meets milling wheat quality, some 10.3 million tons.
I see. Bertrand, thank you so much as always for all your insight. And thank you for watching. For more financial content, don't forget to like and subscribe to our channel.